I think one of the biggest lessons that Kanna taught me in the process of my own healing is self-acceptance. And Kanna is very, very gentle. And for myself, I can say that I always felt held, even though very difficult feelings came up for me. There was a lot of releasing. But because of the nature of this particular plant, you feel very, very held. And of course, if you're going to do a ceremonial dose, you absolutely should do it with a proper facilitator who can actually help process these emotions. And so I think anytime that we confront challenging emotions and trauma, it is going to be difficult. I think working with facilitators and being in a safe space and creating a safe space for yourself and the proper setting is the way to hold space for this process. There is no magic pill that fixes all. There is just that which gives us the opportunity to have a release and accelerate our own healing.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Psychedelic Conversations. Today, I have Stephanie Wang in the house. Thank you so much for being with us. Such a pleasure to have you.
Such a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Susan.
Of course, pleasure is all ours. And finally, I get to speak to a Kanna expert. I've been looking forward to this for a while. And there you are. You appeared. And really looking forward to deep diving into the conversation of the medicine, the heart medicine, Kanna. So before we begin, I'd like to say a few lines from your bio for our listeners to get to know you a little bit. And then we ask you what brings you to this work after that. Stephanie is passionate about power of plants and evolving consciousness. She is the founder and the CEO of Empathogenics, with a mission to restore full spectrum aliveness for all beings. Offers 100% plant-based empathogenic supplements featuring Kanna, a heart-opening succulent from South Africa that is clinically proven to activate an immediate sense of grounded energy, helping people feel more alive, capable, and connected as they navigate everyday stress. And you are a native from Hong Kong. You began your career in corporate finance on Wall Street, and you're a #1 ranked equity analyst in the retail sector with HSBC Securities Hong Kong. Stephanie, this is wonderful, and I'm really enjoying the work that you're bringing to the world. And with that said, what brings you into it?
Wow, thank you, and thank you for actually reminding me of sort of the road to what actually led me here. I started my career in Wall Street, but I was so burnt out, and it really took a big toll on my health. And that's when I really started to look into health and wellness, just because of my own healing. I've also always been really passionate about what it means to be human, and why are we often stuck in these very sort of small ways of being, when I've always known in my heart that we're these abundant, powerful creatures, right? And that there is so much thriving to be had in the world, and yet we're so stuck in our belief systems, in how we live our lives. And so that's always been something that has been a passion. So through my own healing journey, I went through and discovered and studied many modalities. And ultimately, it actually led me from going from banking to wellness and to plant medicine. And about the same time, this is probably around 10 years ago, is when I joined my last company, which is Evolver, and we birthed something called the Alchemist's Kitchen, which is all about, remedies, plant remedies, and botanical products, and using the power of plants to help people heal and thrive. At that same moment is when I actually had my very first plant ceremony. So my first journey was with Kanna. It was not with psilocybin or ayahuasca or San Pedro. It was with Kanna. And it left such an indelible impression because it was an experience where I felt completely and totally enveloped by love and also embodied in love. And it was the most profound experience of connection and oneness and love that I ever felt in my life. And needless to say, that was the beginning of actually working with Kanna personally to continue my healing journey, as well as with many other psychedelics, including ayahuasca and San Pedro and psilocybin. The Kanna always had a special place in my heart. Number one, because it was the first ceremony I ever had. But number two is because of its ability to have us be very present in this feeling versus being taken out of the body, which is a lot of, how, for example, psilocybin and ayahuasca, that's how they work. They work in a very different way through to consciousness. And from a shamanic perspective, ayahuasca and psilocybin mushrooms are considered spirit medicine. So it brings you to consciousness through the spirit. Whereas Kanna is considered heart medicine. So it brings you into consciousness through your heart. And therefore, it brings you back in your body to be more present. And of course, Kanna is psychoactive, definitely. And it's entheogenic, but it is not hallucinogenic. It is not a classic psychedelic. It's more psychedelic adjacent substance. And it's this beautiful plant that's a succulent from South Africa that the Indigenous have been using for thousands of years, which I will get into in a second. But just to finish my long-winded story about the journey, it's because of this feeling, and also feeling very, very strongly about how, we are in this world as humanity at the moment. This healing is very necessary for us to actually have this heart-mind connection and not simply make decisions through our minds, which has gotten us into quite a bit of trouble, but to come back into a place where we can access our decision-making and our lives through empathy, through compassion, and through more love. So that is what actually galvanized me into going through the journey of then doing the research, really making sure and doing all the scientific research that was necessary, and understanding the plant not just from a shamanic and traditional medicine point of view, but also through a scientific lens, and to be able to combine that to offer something that is supportive for people, that helps restore that innate inheritance, I suppose I would say, of feeling alive, of feeling really fully capable and alive and present, and bringing us back into that homeostasis place where we all should be.
I love that. Thank you so much for a little excerpt from where you stand in your perspective as well and your journey. So my question would be for our listeners that are first timers, just stumbling upon this conversation and not really understanding what Kanna is. I know that a lot of our listeners are very much in the psychedelic space, and they come into learning more about the different psychedelic approaches, concepts, and the medicines. And you said it's not hallucinogenic, but it's entheogenic. Is it similar to Psilomethoxin? There is this phenomenon now kind of exploding in some of the psychedelic spaces where it's a hybrid DMT and mushrooms. I don't know if you heard of the Psilomethoxin. It's a very natural way of connecting through the heart, and it's almost like no hallucinogenic effects at all, just kind of landing into your heart space. So I'm just trying to give some of our listeners who probably know more about the Psilomethoxin. And another thing I heard, I think it was one of my connections, she said that people talk about Kanna as MDMA turned inwards. Would you agree?
So to the first part of your question, I unfortunately do not I have not myself experienced, and I don't know much about Psilomethoxin, so I can't really comment there, but I can definitely comment on the second part, which is how Kanna has been often referred to as nature's MDMA, particularly because of a particular Vice article, and it's become a bit of a meme. So on a very sort of high level, you can compare the two in the sense that they're both heart openers, right? You get this sense of emotional openness and heart expansion and that euphoria. Beyond that, they are very, very, very different substances. And I'm happy to share because I think it's important to have people understand the difference. So MDMA is synthetic, of course. Kanna, also called Scaletium tortuosum, is not. It's a plant-based substance. And MDMA contains amphetamines, which Kanna does not. So MDMA is much more intense and is much speedier, if you could use that term, than Kanna. And on a ceremonial dose of Kanna, which you can sort of try and say, okay, well, what is it like on a ceremonial dose of Kanna versus, let's say, MDMA? The intensity will still be different. It won't be the same because it won't have the amphetamine effect. But the great thing about Kanna is that it is neuroprotective. So oftentimes when people take MDMA and they come back, there's a bit of a crash, and you can be severely depleted of serotonin afterwards, and you can feel pretty awful. Kanna, you don't have that at all. And it's very much the opposite. It was very neuroprotective and very supportive of the nervous system. And it regulates the amygdala over time, which means you become more and more resilient to stress and ups and downs. But it doesn't, how should I say this? The downs will not be as down, but the ups are definitely still there. And it basically helps stabilize you and helps balance your system out over time. And another thing is that there's no toxicity because it is an adaptogenic plant. So you're not going to have issues with that down the road either that's going to impact your health in a negative way. And comparatively speaking, Kanna is really, really safe. Some of the side effects, let's say if you have too much, maybe nausea or headache, but most of the time there's just not the same level of risks at all. And you can take Kanna consistently. And that's how the Indigenous would take it. It's something that is really deeply woven into the lives, just to give you a bit of history, of the Indigenous Khoikhoi and San of Southern Africa. And it's part of their medical culture. It's part of their spiritual culture. It's part of their celebration culture. And it's also part of their how they take it when they go on, do very practical things, like when they go hunting and they need to go on multi-day hunts, because of the way that Kanna really supports physical endurance as well. And so that is very, very interesting. So, we can go a little bit more deeply into the Indigenous story as well, because it's really fascinating. But I think in terms of a psychedelic and how it compares to everything else, that's actually really, really important to know, and that there's no tolerance buildup. So you won't have to take more and more to get the same feeling.
That is amazing insight and information. So Kanna, it's from South Africa, you said.
Yes.
And how popular is it at the moment? Because in the mainstream, as you know, we're kind of living in the psychedelic renaissance, so-called, and a lot of people are aware of many different types of medicines. And what are your thoughts? Is it, because I don't really know many people talk about Kanna.
Yes, well, it's interesting because, maybe as recently as a couple of years ago, it would just be known in very, very few corners. But recently, there's absolutely been a renaissance that has been happening with Kanna as well. And Kanna's been around forever. And there's also been studies that have been done on Kanna for the last 30 years, but basically no one has really heard of Kanna until like recently. And I think part of it has to do with the renaissance of psychedelics in general. And I also believe that part of it may have to do with where we are in the moment in time. So post-pandemic, when we all went through the pandemic, there was a lot of isolation, right? This feeling of loneliness, disconnection. And it's really fascinating how Kanna a plant medicine plant that is all about connection has arisen the same time as people are really needing that. And I think more and more people are recognizing that a lot of their own emotional and mental health issues, not everyone, of course, but a lot of it is based on this sense of disconnection, right? Of disassociation. And so Kanna is really beautiful that way because it is a plant exactly that helps you connect and feel. It helps you feel yourself and helps you connect to feelings that have been suppressed that really need to be processed. It's also beautiful because it has this empathogenic, it is an empathogen as well, which means it brings you into more emotional openness and actually makes you more empathetic towards others as well as towards yourself. So healing, as we all know, starts from within. We have to make the decision and you have to step on that path. And at the end of the day, any plant medicine, any substances, those are still things that are outside of ourselves. But the teaching part of this plant and with most plant medicines is that, wait a minute, we're here to remind you that you're connected to nature and we're nature and so are you. When we take on plant medicines, we start to embody that consciousness as well. So I think that the timing of where we are in the world at the moment, with so much extremism, with so much dislocation and alienation even from ourselves, within ourselves, that this is a medicine that's for this time. So yeah, I just think it's a beautiful synchronous timing, how everything is showing up at the same time, where the solution and the problem are there to be visible.
I really love that insight. I also love the term psychedelics are cultivating us. It's definitely to do with the time where we are in our history timeline, and it's to do with also what the humanity needs in this moment. It's almost like they're here to rescue us from the imminent furthering the disconnection and the isolation and the mental health.
Destruction, yeah, and severe destruction and annihilation at the end of the day, and we often, when we see each other, we say, hey, how are you? We're like, oh, we're fine. I'm fine. How are you? And most of us have been trained to almost have that sort of reflex response. And yet when we ask people, how do you really feel? How do you feel? Right? Many people can't even describe how they feel because they're in their heads. And being able to actually connect emotionally to yourself and all the feelings that normally, because we're busy people, we have to, get ahead in life or pay the mortgage or whatever it is, we tend to disassociate from our feelings. And that ultimately in the long run creates a lot of issues, a lot of suppression and repression that, if not channeled properly, will have a negative effect on your health, on your relationships, and everything. And so one of the most beautiful things that Kanna does is it teaches us to feel ourselves and to really reconnect and start to connect back to the feelings that we've been repressing and allow them to surface and process. What that does is actually allows us to be back in flow with life and not try to go against it in some ways. It, in a weird way, also clears obstacles. And I'm getting a little bit philosophical here, but energetically, I do believe that's what it's doing. And it's actually calling us to be our own healers, because ultimately we are our own healers. And these are all amazing allies, these sacred plants and medicines, our allies and our teachers, to remind us of that. And so there's a much deeper message, which, again, it's something you can decide whether you want to access or not. But the deeper message there is really about empowerment and liberation.
Yeah, totally agreed. Coming back to what you said about they help us feel and reconnect to ourselves. So what are your thoughts on, coming from, obviously, my background from trauma-informed place? I hear a lot of people talk about having, they call it a bad trip or a bad experience. If, let's say, we're living in a society where disconnection is the norm,
Mhm.
Do you also like witness these kind of conversations where the moment the person is connected to themselves, it can be quite uncomfortable? So through the mechanisms of action, how Kanna works, do you know if people can stay safe and learn to accept that connection? Because that reconnection, talking about my own experience, it was quite scary. And
Mm.
that initial sort of opening and connecting and feeling,
Mhm.
being in the body and understanding what connection really is. Because I feel like, we have this generational template where everybody is kind of running on the same template of like this connection is the norm. And so then we don't have any reference point of what it feels like to be in the body. And
Mhm.
that could be quite threatening to a lot of people. So
Absolutely.
in your experience, how does Kanna take care of that?
That's a really, really good question. So I think that there's two parts to that, to the answer. This is where microdosing can be a very useful modality with Kanna. On a ceremonial dose, let's say someone is sitting in ceremony and they have a lot of trauma. I myself as well, you know, I'll share a little bit about my story, okay? Just family trauma growing up, and so much of it I just pushed aside because, you just have to go on living and surviving. And I think one of the biggest lessons that Kana taught me in the process of my own healing is self-acceptance. And there is something that is so gentle, even in very high doses. It's very, very gentle. It's not like ayahuasca, who is the, master teacher grandmother, because she will whip your butt. She will kick your ass, if those people who have done, who've sat with ayahuasca. And she's beautiful. She teaches in a very different way. And she works with us in a different way. Kana is very, very gentle. And for myself, I can say that I always felt held, even though very difficult feelings came up for me. There was a lot of releasing. But because of the nature of this particular plant, it's you feel very, very held. And of course, if you're going to do a ceremonial dose, you absolutely should do it with a proper facilitator who can actually help process these emotions. Can you have difficult experiences with Kana as well? Yes, you can. But this is where the facilitation and the experience really comes in. And I think setting is, of course, really, really important. But where it's very different from the other medicines, again, is the safety and also the gentleness of Kana. So because it's a heart opener, there is, even within the difficulty, for me at least, I can say, there is you feel very held, and you feel that you can still let go into it. And it's I think for people who have never felt that connection and openness to love itself, which I have to say for myself in the very beginning, that was part of it as well. And I also have, because I've worked with other people who have been working with Kana, for them it was also a bit scary in the sense that it's like, what is this feeling? But it wasn't terrifying. Um, it's not terrifying in the way that, let's say, a bad trip is, because then it's like you have all the visuals and everything else, and you feel completely out of control and out of your body. This is not like that at all. In that particular case, because I was actually there was, of course, a shaman and facilitator who were there, who really helped guide that process. And over time, it was lovely to witness, because this particular individual could open up more and relax into it more. And so I think anytime that we confront challenging emotions and trauma, it is going to be difficult. I think having, working with facilitators and being in a safe space and creating a safe space for yourself, and the proper setting is the way to hold space for this process. There is no magic pill that fixes all. There is just that which gives us the opportunity to have a release and accelerate our own healing. And like I said, these are amazing allies and teachers.
Yeah, that's so wonderful. Yeah, very clear. The message is clear. And from my perspective, what I came to know is that there is a quote, I think it's kind of associated with Rumi, I don't know. There's a quote that says, it could be like I'm paraphrasing, 200 years of 200 years of journey could have been 2 days with the right mentor or the facilitator. I feel like as much as there is a huge culture around doing this on your own, like a lot of people love to do explore themselves, just because I guess it was kind of ingrained in the culture because it was legal. It was so many things were illegal, and of course people had to do these things underground, and there was not always a opportunity for have the right facilitator. And at the moment, from where I am, people that actually need this medicine, people that need the facilitation and the guidance and proper appropriation, they don't have the means, the time, the money. They don't have it, and they go off and try these things. It's almost like trial and error. They try and find and discover and explore themselves, and in the process, of course, they get traumatized, re-traumatized. They experience a lot of different uncomfortable processes. And so I'm huge on the facilitation, by the way, just Stephanie, like I'm really big on the, like, you've got to find the right person who understands the process of what it means to release and work through those emotions while you're with the guidance of the medicine. Because if you don't have that, it can take months, years even to unpack what's just happened.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So on high doses of Kanna, you said this could be a really ideal appropriation and setting. So what do you know? How many, like, what are we talking about? Is there quite enough facilitators out there who's trained to guide with Kanna? Do you think there's enough out there?
I think there will be more. We are actually working right now with someone who's experienced, particularly in Kanna. I mean, there's quite a number of facilitators that facilitate with ayahuasca or psilocybin. There definitely are. They're out there. And what we're also trying to do is to, again, educate more people on how to do this. And we're coming out actually with more content with a free ebook and then our blog articles as well that will be coming out that will be talking a lot more about this. So, it's a community that's there, but that's growing. And we're actually finding more people who have found this medicine and that they themselves feel, hey, this is the medicine, I want to be carrying this medicine and bringing it to more people. So this is happening at the same time, as well as sort of there has been a group, I would say, who've been facilitating Kanna amongst other medicines for a number of years now, but it's really not been that big. But now I think slowly more and more people are. It's not very, very easy to find someone who is a Kanna facilitator, but we're also working on that. So hopefully we'll have a directory at some point that people we've worked with and trust, and that we can also share with our communities and other communities as well. But to your question earlier, though, that's why microdosing Kanna is very interesting. And it's not even like microdosing is almost not exactly the right term. You can dose Kanna on non-ceremonial doses and totally go through the day and be very supported because, it helps reduce anxiety and stress. It actually helps improve cognitive function. So there have been a ton of studies that people have been doing research on Kanna. Scientists have been doing research on Kanna for the last 30 years. It's just most people don't know about it. And there are studies that are out there that, shows clinical proof that it helps with anxiety and stress. It also has the potential to help, because of its anti-inflammatory properties, to help with reducing the risk of chronic disease and with, helping with addiction. and obesity as well. So there's all those possibilities that this amazing plant offers. But in the moment, this is why, I wanted to create Ka Empathogenics, because I wanted to be able to bring this medicine on a day-to-day basis for people. So you don't have to sit in ceremony. You could, but what's great about this, because it's an adaptogen, it can be taken as a supplement. So we encourage people to actually take it daily, because of its non-toxic, adaptogenic, and empathogenic qualities. And it's an anxiolytic, of course, but on top of it, it actually helps improve cognitive function. So there's also a ton of studies that back how it improves problem solving, how it improves, for example, memory and focus. And this is well documented as well. So there's many benefits.
This is wonderful. What I'm feeling at the moment is maybe this could be the medicine for some people who are in recovery, some people who are doing their trauma work. There are so many people that are in our community as well. They are struggling with mental health and some of these neurodivergent spectrums, and so many things like ADHD, also, panic and anxiety, and a lot of like depressive mood disorders and so on and so forth. And one of the things that we'd love to do in our community is currently we have this 6-week structure where we take people on a microdosing education and guidance with different kind of medicines. So this program is actually endorsed by Dr. James Fadiman for the microdosing. Yeah, and just because the program is intentionally created to hold people in their process and guide and give them the right information and education. So as you were talking about this Kanna medicine, I felt maybe this could be a beautiful entry point medicine for a lot of people.
Yes.
that are not ready to blow their nervous system out with very intense psychedelic medicines. Currently, this is what's happening, because the Western mind, for me, like the Western way of living, and the people from the West are very different in comparison to those are indigenous in communities. The community is integration, a lot of my guests say to me. So unfortunately, we don't have this in our bustling, hustle bustle cities where everyone's just running the rat race, and last thing they need is blowing out their nervous system with very intense psychedelic medicines. So what are your thoughts on that? Could this be an entry point, like a microdose for a beginner who is extremely like fed up? They've tried everything. They have addictions they cannot walk away from. They're gripped with these kind of mental health challenges and so on and so forth, and feeling isolated and disconnected. So it's not just one thing.
Completely. And it's interesting you're mentioning the 6-week program, because we're going to be launching in January a 30-day journey into the heart with Kanna program. So we would love to invite people to join us on that program. So this is a free program. You just get our product, and you're going to be part of this held space where we will bring in actually experts who are integration specialists and facilitators to help facilitate the 30-day microdosing journey with Ka and Kanna. So Kanna is very, very interesting in the context you just mentioned, because it's 100% legal, except in one state in the US, in Louisiana, but then Damiana is also not legal there. So, but everywhere else and any country that I know, it's completely legal. So you already have that hurdle taken care of. Second thing is, it is a great entry point for people who are interested in plant medicines, who are interested in the psychedelic space, but like you said, are not ready to have their minds blown and to lose control and to have these visuals. Because it's gentle, like I said, it really helps ease you into that process. It's still an entheogen in the sense that even on a small dose, you don't have to be on a heroic dose. It will bring you into a different consciousness space where you're more aware of your emotions, your feelings, and you. it'll calm your nervous system so you can actually have access to yourself again. So that is like taking you out of fight or flight, like I mentioned, because Kanna regulates the amygdala and fight or flight reflexes and responses. So it is a great entry point. And on top of that, people who are already like they're loving their psychedelics journeys, but afterwards, it's very draining. So their serotonin might get drained and they feel sort of a need to get replenished with their serotonin, and also for a way to ground the journey they just had. Maybe they just had an amazing psilocybin or ayahuasca journey, and they need something that can help them process everything that's come up. Because as we know, with a lot of psychedelic medicine, it's a really accelerated way of kind of working through a lot of your stuff. And it brings up a lot of feelings and a lot of traumas. And not just that, but just your life story for you to kind of relook at. And it can be too much sometimes. And you want to kind of slow it down so that you can absorb it and make it part of you and make it an embodied part of yourself, so you can carry that wisdom and any kinds of necessary changes in your behaviors or behavioral patterns or attitudes. The way to work with that is actually the way to work for that intention is to work with Kanna. So after a long sort of after a ceremony, once the medicine, whatever the medicine that you're taking is out of the system, start taking Kanna, because that will actually ground that whole experience. You're able to then really process, understand. Journaling is a great process to do during this time as well, so that you get to, whether it's through words, through writing, through your own thoughts, through drawing, through art, music, it helps you in that process of embodiment of what you just went through, so that in the future, your ego and, who's just gotten blown open can still access in a way that's non-threatening, that you're not then kind of, oh my God, I want to go there again, And so Kanna is a great ally for any psychedelics, really, especially afterwards, in terms of grounding that experience so that you can process the emotions. So in that way, it's a great companion for anybody who's a psychonaut.
Yeah, sounds amazing. And yes, coming back to this, maybe the holding container, I was thinking, because we call it citizen science, to be honest, one of my passions is to bring as much anecdotal data and results of people trying different things and reporting back. So this is kind of what we've been doing with some of these programs. And yeah, if you support us and
Definitely.
if our listeners are interested, we could definitely put something together, also help the citizen science, because we want to learn more about these medicines collectively, like give more opportunity to people to choose the medicine they feel drawn to. I feel like this is a lot to do with calling. I always say to people, go with what feels right in you. If the medicine's calling you, go and explore it. There's nothing to lose. So something to think about.
Absolutely. And just to double tap on that, there's never one size fits all. For some people, it's cannabis is their medicine. For some other people, it's mushrooms. For some people, it's Kanna. And I think it's just a blessing, I think, for all of us that we have rediscovered a lot of these medicines that have come through this renaissance to our awareness again. And I will say, though, I think the one piece that's often missing, that's not often respected, is the indigenous wisdom part of this, is the traditional ancient wisdom. It really is our humanities, our human inheritance, and often is overlooked because, either someone is trying to particularly synthesize trying to just take particular alkaloids and synthesize something else and patent it and make it into another medicine, or whether we're so fascinated, again, we were talking about in the West in particular, it's like, okay, bigger, stronger, faster, all the time. And how do we get to the next level of this experience? Whereas so much of healing is in the subtle realms. And this is why Kanna is so different. And I also understand some people are like, oh, I much prefer doing something else because it's, I'm like, hey, whatever works for you. But I do want to call people to kind of come into an understanding of what the message is with Kanna. And so I think the piece today that I really want to call people's attention to is the indigenous and ancient wisdom that is so much part of these plant medicines, because they've been our human inheritance for, since there has been life on the planet. We have also co-evolved with plants, which we often forget about, and we are part of nature. And they're, through the thousands of years that we've evolved, and in particular, just speaking about Kanna, the Khoikhoi and the San tribes of Southern Africa, this has been part of their culture, central to their society for so long. And I think today what we're often missing is we're taking the science, or we're kind of just chasing the high. Again, the Western perspective of, stronger, faster, more, and better, more is better, stronger is better, whereas we're missing the subtlety oftentimes. And so much of the healing is actually in that subtlety, being able to be still, to quiet down, to connect, to kind of notice what's going on in our own bodies, in our hearts. And Kanna is a great ally for that. And often, because she can be subtle, or it's gender neutral, really, so it can be he and she, it can be subtle and yet extremely powerful, because it's in those liminal spaces is where healing takes place. It's where realizations, insights, wisdom births itself and allows itself to be accessed. So that is a big part of it. And those teachings come from the Indigenous, and also the Indigenous teachings always talk about reciprocity, always talks about interconnection. We and nature are not separate. And, to ensure our own health and thriving, we have to make sure that our environment is also alive, thriving, and not suffering degradation to the point where, we're actually doing a huge disservice, not just to our environment and nature, but also to ourselves and all the other beings that are on the planet. So there's this subtle nature of this plant that is really, really beautiful. And so, it's something that we would love to, for example, share with your community. And we'd be happy to share Ka, and have people try and taste and sample also what it's like to work with this plant. Yeah. But this human, I should say, the indigenous wisdom that comes with it, which is this very basic foundational knowledge that life, every kind of life, has agency on this planet, and plants also have their own agency, and that instead of exploiting them, working with them is actually the much more powerful way to be and to actually thrive and to heal. And this is the subtle art that in modern day that we've lost. This is the rich wisdom that the Indigenous and any type of traditional wisdom that is part and parcel of how these plants have been stewarded through time is essential for us.
So beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. And so this is really aligned, by the way. What we're trying to achieve in our community is that, trying to reverse engineer what's been done through the revolution, industrial revolution that we all underwent. And so I think the way that I like honoring the Indigenous wisdom and honoring the ritual is, even on a microdose level, try and bring in some ritual intention, some prayer, whatever that means for anybody. And then also deliberately creating conditions where we are less consuming, letting go of adding and hoarding and collecting and even information, right? Look how quickly we can access everything nowadays, right? We can access information instantaneously. So what we try to do is bring in the microdosing, but also shed everything else. come back to what you said, that find healing in the subtlety, in the quiet, in the silence, in the ritual, in the reciprocity, and in the connecting with nature, and also honoring. So this is so aligned. So I'm glad that Kanna is the representation of all of these beautiful things that we all seek in our community. So I'm really excited for that. I'm sure a lot of people will be wanting to try and explore. So for those that are interested in, we will add all of your links, and also the 30-day trial offering and community and all of that. We'll have everything in the show notes about how they can access and find and explore your medicine. And one last question. I know we're coming to the end of our conversation. I just wanted to ask you, so should somebody who is exploring Kanna, whether micro or ceremonial, should they be considering putting their life on the microscope, and also take care of some of these, environmental stresses, like at least become aware, and then create the setting and the right environment for this medicine to receive that full potential of what it could do for the individual? I think this is what's been, discussed more now among the microdoses, and because I come from that coaching microdosing, I understand that sometimes when we introduce the medicine into our life, we also simultaneously need to start looking around of what is it that we investing too much energy on some of those things, like the relationships, the work stresses, all these other aspects of the person's life, so that they can prepare themselves, prepare their body and the mind, and create space for the medicine to come in and do the work. What are your thoughts on that?
I think ideally that's the best way to do it. And because what we're doing is we're actually respecting ourselves in the process. We're saying, hey, our health and our thriving is important. Let's take out a moment in the day, in the weekend, in the evening, whatever it is. This is a pause from the daily activity that we're always busy in. That busyness will always be there. Let's take a moment to prioritize ourselves in this moment and our health and well-being. So it doesn't have to be sort of a big deal. It can just be taking at least, 5 minutes out of your day. And, of course, if you're doing ceremony, then there's a whole ritual with that as well. But I'm talking about on a daily basis, because we're all busy people. It's like, how do we bring the sacred into our lives and integrate it in a way that's accessible, that's easy, that actually practically helps us? So this is what I would say, that especially for Ka and for Kanna, we recommend taking it in the very beginning of the day. That's how I take it in the morning, is in the morning before breakfast on an empty stomach. And I always set an intention, and I encourage everybody to do that, because when we set an intention, we're not mindlessly consuming, because that's a transaction. It's just, oh, let me take this pill. Let me just forget about it, and I'm going to get back to work. We're creating a moment of presence. We're creating a relationship now with what we're taking into our bodies. And that relationship creation is the missing link that we have in our lives, that causes so much sadness at the end of the day, because it's this lack of connection and this isolation. So you can do it in a very mini way, because this is a reflection that you can then take into the rest of your life, when you have an intention before you take something into your body. So if you have a chew, or if you have a little tincture, just go, all right, so what's the intention today that I want to create with this medicine? And it could be super mundane or be super profound. It could be, I just would love to feel more gratitude during the day. Or, you know what, I just need to accomplish a lot today. And I would like to come into this co-creating space with this medicine where I feel that I'm very productive, that I'm more creative, that I can get things done, more consciously, not just quicker, but more consciously, with more wisdom, so that decisions I make are not just on the fly, or just considering one aspect when actually I can actually look at something holistically. Some basic intentions, right, you could have, and then just take it in and have a moment of gratitude and let it go, and then just go on about your day. But I think making that space and having the intention is activating the medicine, because you're respecting the Kanna, and you're respecting what Kanna is about to teach and about to give us. And just like in any relationship, if you're a human being and you're just like interacting with someone in a transactional way, everybody knows it, and just like, okay, nobody gives a damn, right? Just like, okay, what are you selling me? All right, I'm buying this. Okay, bye. Whereas it's very different when you're creating a relationship with another human being. It's like, hey, you know what? What do you do? What's going on? How can we build a relationship instead of just being transactionally based on this one interaction? So it is very much the same way how we take things into our bodies, especially these amazing teaching plants.
Yeah, that's so wonderful. Yes, the relationship aspect. So it doesn't need to be a chore. It doesn't need to be another thing on the checklist. You just create the moment, take it in the morning. Is it a daily practice?
For me, it is. And it doesn't have to be in the morning. So some great use cases for Ka. I take it in the morning. I take it every morning, and then maybe I'll continue. Like I'll usually do it for like a month straight, and then I'll take a break for 2 weeks. Like I said, we always encourage people to take it daily, because then you really start to see the effects. And at some point, you may not feel it's necessary anymore. Then leave it, because that is the message. You don't need me anymore. Great, we've done our job. Your brain is a little bit more reset. It's not so triggered as easily as before into fight or flight, because that's how it's chemically actually working on your brain. So for me, it's a daily thing. You don't have to do it that way. Another great time to take it is in the afternoon, let's say after lunch, and you're like at 4 p.m. and it's like, okay, oh my God, there's a dip in energy and I just need a little refresh. That's a great time to also take some Ka. Ka is great if you want to go out with friends. We recommend the tincture, like dose your friends instead of drinking alcohol. This is so much healthier. You won't have a hangover. You remember everything that happened, and you're going to be able to connect with each other, with your friends, in this totally heart open space. And it's a very elevated, higher frequency way to connect heart to heart. It's also great for intimacy. So if you're with your partner, definitely try it out with them, either the juice or the tincture, and you'll see how you communicate with each other is different, how your touch will feel different, because Kanna also has the ability to enhance pleasure and happiness in the sense of like felt senses and touch. So that is really, really fun. And also just imagine, when you're together with someone, that you're also on top of everything, you are connecting with them in this heart open space. And it adds a whole new dimension, into sex, into however ways you want to connect with someone else. And I would say try it before you work out, definitely, because you'll see that you're going to be able to, if you're a runner, you're going to be able to run longer. You're going to be able to feel less fatigued. That is how traditionally it was used in cultures. And the ceremonial aspect, just in case I didn't mention, that's huge part of the Indigenous use as well, is to commune with the divine and with their ancestors through higher doses of Kanna, through trance, dance, all of that.
Yeah, this is very helpful. Thank you so much. And I was just going to ask you about do you need to take it forever? Because, a lot of the questions I get all the time is, about the microdosing. Do you always have to take it forever? And you just said no, because there will be a time you just have to kind of let go.
You don't have to do anything. You'll feel like you won't take it. You don't need it. This is a huge, and I really want to emphasize this. This is so different from so many other substances out there. And a huge advantage over SSRIs is you will not be dependent on it, in the sense that, oh my God, I either need more just to get the same result, because there is no tolerance buildup. That's number one. Number two, and it will just leave your system, and you won't have that. You'll have the cumulative benefit of the result of having your amygdala being more regulated and your nervous system being more regulated, but you won't need continual amounts just because now if you're taking 30 milligrams, suddenly you need 50 now just to get the same feeling. It doesn't work like that. It's completely the opposite. So there's that. And then I think just want to absolutely say this as well, is that it is very, it is non-addictive. It is not habit forming. It is actually used to treat addiction because of its ability to de-addict you, to actually prevent you from being hooked on whatever it is that you have that addiction with. So it's very much the opposite. And it is a true medicine in the sense that the longer you take it, the less you need. Only when you really need it, you'll be called to take it again, and then you can take it again. And so it's giving you that sovereignty to heal yourself, and also saying, hey, you're good. And I think that's a massive, massive advantage.
Absolutely. And it's the opposite of what the pharmaceuticals are
Yes.
engineered in the way that we associate with medicine or medication in that sense.
Absolutely.
Completely different approach and understanding. So we are changing our relationship in how we take the medicine
As well.
Yeah.
And if I may, I would also just like to share a little bit about Ka itself. And we have 2 products right now. There's going to be more. We have our chews and our tincture. And our chews are patent pending. And I just wanted to share because there's so many other plants that we've actually included in this formulation that are synergistic with Kanna. So there's snow lotus, there's acmella, there is lavender, and there's mint. And snow lotus is a beautiful plant that grows in the Himalayas that helps actually maintain homeostasis. It also helps with circulation. And it's also sort of a beauty tonic as well. And acmella is super antimicrobial and also anti-inflammatory. And, Kanna mentioned before also is anti-inflammatory as well. And together they just work, and together with lavender as well, which is also anti-inflammatory and also antimicrobial in its own way. All of this working together, we have a synergistic formulation that we spent years actually doing to create this. And also what's really special about it is that it's in the form of a chew, but it's not a gummy. So it doesn't have any sugar, doesn't have any elastomers. There's not even any preservatives. It's truly 100% plant. And it was made without any heat degradation. So if, with gummies and any kinds of sort of candies, usually it has to be put through like a heating process of 300 degrees or more. Whereas this was made at room temperature. It's pH neutral, essentially, and it's super bioactive as a result. So the plants and what you're taking in are really, really alive, and it's full spectrum. So it's not just the extract, but we also use the full spectrum Kanna on top of the standardized extract. And same thing with the tincture. We hand extract and we hand make everything as well. So there's a lot of love that has gone into it and a lot of science.
Sounds like the alchemy lab. It does sound like I know you have a background in sort of understanding the working with the plants. I think for me, all plants are medicine.
Mm-hmm,
and I love that you are combining and making this little alchemical chew and the tincture again. So I'm looking forward to try these medicines. So I'm so glad you moved into this space, and I'm so glad you're bringing this to the people I'm sure, and I want to see it grow, because I think this is the future. We're all trying to I think contribute in a way that we want to give the agency and sort of give enough information, education, and opportunity, and provide the best medicine so that people can take their own health in their own hands. So that's a beautiful mission. So thank you.
Absolutely.
I have one last question. I could really keep you here longer, but I know we're
that's
mindful of our time. So
it's totally fine.
My personal question is, which I always get from our listeners, through the Indigenous, obviously, perspective and their use, is Kanna safe for children or young people?
Traditionally, Kanna has been taken by the whole family in Indigenous cultures, in the Khoi and San cultures. So, for example, babies, even as they're teething or when they have colic, they're actually given a little bit of Kanna just to ease their inflammation, to ease their pain a little bit. A lot of times people ask us about pregnancy. Hey, can we take Kanna when we're pregnant? Now, what we say, of course, is that there's no studies right now. We recommend to not to do so, simply because there's not enough studies in the modern world that have been done yet. However, I can also say that traditionally in Indigenous cultures, pregnant women would take it definitely for easing pain, for easing nausea as well, and for constipation. So that is a traditional use as well. And so, the short answer is that it's very safe as a substance in general. I just want to make sure that, I suppose, to say this responsibly, I just would add that because Kanna is not so known yet for everyone, I think there is a bit of a learning curve to understand how it works, so that you can actually share it with your kids, or but it's a different dosage, obviously, for children. So it's something that we're also looking into. But for now, these products are for adults, but they're not. I cannot. I mean, it's not. How do I say this? Kanna has also been used for children as well. It's just more in the Indigenous cultures. So that will give you a sense of the possibilities, of course, in the modern setting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's always good to put out the disclaimer, but at the same time, I do know that a lot of Indigenous people, they never separate children and adults. They see life as life. Doesn't matter,
Yes.
what age. So that's great to know, because another passion of mine is to how can we help these young children that are now being subjected to all these horrendous things, like drugging them up with Adderall for ADHD and calling them neurodivergent and things like that. So children are literally at this point of our time, facing a lot of the burden of what the adults are not willing to take responsibility of, which
you're absolutely right. Yeah.
I feel like bringing some of the natural medicines to them is going to be a huge relief going forward.
Absolutely. And this is actually a great candidate, a great ally for the whole family.
Yeah. Great. Looking forward to its evolving and spreading, and more science and more study, hopefully. Okay. Wonderful, Stephanie. So lovely having you. And I'm sure we'll continue to have you returning and update us on your journey and your expansion. As closing notes, please tell us the mission, the projects. What are you creating? Everything that you are here to set out to do for our listeners, and where can they find you?
Our mission is to restore full spectrum aliveness for all beings. And full spectrum means the full spectrum of being human, all of our feelings, and respecting all of that, and bringing us back to how we should be, which is alive and thriving. We are currently, if this is something that listeners are interested in, they can visit our site, which is ohmyka.com, ohmyka.com. You can also visit and check out and follow us on Instagram. Our Instagram handle is ka.empathogenics, ka.empathogenics. So that's ka.empathogenics. You can find us the same way on Facebook, ka.empathogenics. And we're actually about to and we've just launched our ambassador program. So if you are out there and this mission inspires you as well, and you want to join us on this mission of bringing more heart-centeredness into the world, please join our ambassador program, which we're going to launch a partnership page on our site soon. But in the meantime, if you would like to become an ambassador and be a part of the community, then you can email us at hi@empathogenics.com, or you can just fill in the contact form on the website or DM us on Instagram, and we would love to hear from you and have you join and be a part of the community. We would love to amplify. And for our ambassadors, there's a financial sort of affiliate arrangement as well. But beyond that, it's also just being a part of community where we would love to highlight what you're doing in the world that is in line and in alignment with us. So it's about amplifying the global mission.
Thank you so much for that. And we'll add all of these this information into the show notes, including your bio as well.
Thank you. And one more thing I'd love to share is for your listeners, we would love to offer a code so that they can use it to purchase anything on our store for a 10% discount. And the code is PSYCONVERSATIONS. So that's PSY Conversations with an S. And you can use that code and shop on our site as well.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much. Appreciate the gesture and this offering. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. It was really wonderful to be with you and just to share more about this beautiful plant. Some people, because right now there's a big trend of stacking psychedelics. So doing a bit of, let's say, I don't know, LSD and then a little cacao and then a little something else and all these substances. So my recommendation is for people who are starting with Kanna, just to respect Kanna, give it its own space, allow yourself to be with it because it's subtle. And especially if you're taking it on microdose, don't try and stack too much on top of it. Then if you are interested, okay, now I'm kind of getting a baseline of what this feels like. If you want to, that's great. A lot of people ask the question of stacking specifically psilocybin when someone is microdosing psilocybin versus microdosing Kanna. So we say no more. Like the sweet spot is probably about 150 milligrams of psilocybin plus however much, I don't know, 30, 50 milligrams of 30 milligrams or so of Kanna is a nice balance. You just have to be careful. Definitely don't do heroic doses of psilocybin together with a big dose of Kanna. That's not going to work. And they each have their own realm. They have their own sovereignty in each of their realms. And so, we always say respect that. Each has its own space and time. But because this question comes up so much, I just wanted to add that.
I love this. Thank you for this again. Right on schedule, because this is what we voice and this is what we stand behind. I'm personally not a fan of adding everything in. I love and I advocate creating or building a relationship with each medicine,
absolutely.
even if it's LSD, even if it's a substance or a synthesized substance. I always say that let's build a relationship, and find the time or a stage where you're just focusing, giving space to that one medicine at a time. Yeah, we appreciate this, and it's been helpful. And now I feel so much more confident because I always wanted to learn more. And you seem to really have this, large education around it, not just the scientific, but the indigenous, like the full spectrum. And I really appreciate that. And thank you for enlightening us today, and all the best for your expansion journey.
Thank you so much. And it's an honor to be with you and to share.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for joining us. Hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. Please get in touch with myself or Stephanie. We'll have all the links, or at least share with us if you had any experience with Kanna and you want to share, ask question in the comments. And don't be shy. You can always reach out, be part of the conversation and communities. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now. Thank you so much for joining us. Psychedelic Conversations podcast is designed to educate, inform, and expand awareness. For more information, please head over to psychedelicconversations.com. You can also share with your friends or leave a review so that we can reach more people. You can also join us in our private Facebook group to keep the conversation going. This show is for information purposes only, and it is not intended to provide mental health or medical advice. Thanks for listening.